Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and it's February 17th. Happy February 17th, Thursday. Um, Today, I'm talking slowly so that we catch up to 3:30. Just kind of settling in here. This month is February 2022, and I am talking about spirituality. And the reason I'm talking about spirituality, or the focus of this, is not to tell you what spirituality is so much, but I am telling you that. Uh, but how to maybe perceive it, or think about it, or take it in, or be with it in a way that may be uh, more accessible to you. Um, when we hear the word spirit, spiritual, spirituality, we have a perspective of what that means based on what we've been told, or what people have told us, or what we've read, or what we've seen, or maybe what we've experienced. Uh, but to have your own direct experience, to articulate your own direct experience, to write down your own direct experience, helps you realize what's your path, what's your experience with spirit, spiritual, and spirituality, and what's really true for you. One of the elements of the intentions of this talk on spirituality, and I'm going to continue this into March, is that much like sex, sexual, and sexuality, or sense, sensual, and sensuality, is we have these elements of ourselves, or aspects of ourselves. And today we're talking about spirit. We have a spirit, we have a spiritual self, we have a spiritual essence, we have an energy. Spirit is energy. And this is in us. And some of us just think it's like air with no significance. But as we get more conscious, or we get more aware, or we wake up, sometimes we go, wow, what was that? We have experiences that says, boy, I'm more than just this body. I'm more than just my personality. I'm more than just my roles or my identities. Something else is happening here. Quite often, this happens with people who have a crisis of meaning, a midlife crisis, or crisis of spirit, or something that shows up that says there's something going on here, and it's not this me, it's another me inside. And so we begin to this relationship with this part of us that we didn't know we had, because we've been trained, domesticated, to think that we are our personalities, we are our roles, we are our jobs, we are our families, we are our dot dot dot, as opposed to we are this spiritual self, this universal element, that has no tangibility, but we live and reside within this physical vibration, and we think this is who we are. But as we something happens for most of us, one way or another, and it starts to cultivate different things that happen, that in a sense, some people notice that their clock is saying 11:11 every time they look at the clock, or 12:12, or 1:1. They're noticing synchronicities and go, wow, isn't that interesting? So they start to have these experiences, or maybe they had a dream or a vision or something that happened, that what's called transpersonal or metaphysical, or something out of the ordinary, a peak experience. We start to go, wow, there's something more than this. So we start to identify, I have a spiritual spirit self, I have a spirit. Spirit is this energy. When people go, wow, she's got a great spirit, or let's get some, spirit for our high school, or those kinds of things. That spirit is that expression, that excitement, that upness. And we all have it. We all have a spirit self. Sometimes it's not always up, sometimes it just is. But we have a spiritual self. And so we start to begin to cultivate a relationship with this spiritual self. And that's what we're doing in spirituality. Spirituality is the relationship we're cultivating with this part of ourselves that we don't, we're not taught about really enough. It's happening more and more, but we're not taught about that. So we start to have this relationship with this self, and it starts to allow us an expression of self that's beyond just our our contrived, our consensus view of reality that says this is how it should be. I was thinking about all the ways that, if you look at me and you go, oh, she's a woman and she is, I'm um, going to be 70 soon. You have probably never heard that from me before, but I'm teasing. I say it all the time because there's a part of me that's like, I don't know how to identify myself in that way in terms of my age. So all of these identifiers, which what is how I thought I was going to be in my life. In a sense, I was identifying myself as single or married, or identified myself as a mother or a mother to be, or a graduate student or a coach, or all these ways that I identified myself that are part of this consensus view of reality. But there are so many ways that people are beginning to identify themselves that is out of our normal paradigm. So, for instance, all of the pronouns, the she, he, they, and how people are articulating themselves differently because they have a sense of who they are beyond their physicality. They have a sense of who they are beyond the clothes that you're supposed to wear, or makeup or whatever. There's all of these ways that individuals are beginning to identify who they are beyond what we've been taught. And to me, that's really, really exciting. When I had really long hair for a long time, and I had an identity with this long hair, and it meant something to me. Um, but when I got clear about, what is mine, this is mine, no hair, basically, very short. Those kinds of things where we're contrived, or we think I have to have long hair because that means something, as opposed to my expression in the world is this. This is the expression of me in the world. And the more that I get clearer about that, the more I think I'm of service in the world. In a sense, I don't have to do things. I can do these YouTubes, and if but it's the expression of who I am. It's not necessarily even what I'm saying. It's just me being here and you being here. We're having a connection, and that's what's important. So my point in saying that is that we're learning that there's a part of us, an aspect of ourselves that's not in this physical, what we think of is physical form, but this energy form. We think this is what I'm supposed to be. People with gender, I'll say gender issues, gender expressions is changing all over the place. Like I said, with pronouns and stuff, and the relationship with that is not only a sexual or a gender issue, but it's in a sense a spiritual issue because we're identifying with something that's beyond ourselves. The other thing I've been saying in these is that we kind of mesh a lot of metaphysical or non-physical things with spiritual. And I want to be really clear that what we're doing in essence is we're realizing who we are in our own divinity. We're relating to the world and the world of non-physical and the frequencies and all of that in terms of we're realizing the degree which is we are sacred, and that it is all sacred. And God dwells within us. God dwells within me as me. God dwells within you as you. God dwells within the trees or this microphone or my computers. God dwells within all of us and all of things. And when we know that, then we begin to honor ourselves. We begin to honor not only ourselves, but everyone, because we go, wow, if that's true for me, that's true for you. We begin to cultivate compassion and empathy. We get for ourselves and others. We begin to honor the expression of God through me. And that's really pretty cool. One of the so today, what I wanted to focus on was spirituality in relation to callings, passions, the hero's journey, intuition, because I think this is a really important part of our journey in this life, and I know it has been for me. Um, I wrote a book, 2011. 2012, I think it was published. It's called The Unholy Path of a Reluctant Adventurer. The Unholy Path of a Reluctant Adventurer. And yes, that is me, First Communion. And yes, I grew up Catholic, but this isn't about Catholicism or anything, a little bit about that, but mostly about living a life on an unholy path as opposed to a holy path, which would have been what my mother and father told me I should do and how I should be living. That's the holy path. So I lived on took the unholy path. And so I was a reluctant adventurer. And what that meant is to me, or what it does mean, is that I did some really amazingly adventurous things in my life. And um, but I wasn't, I don't think of myself as an adventurer. I think that in essence, my essential nature may be that, but I had callings. And so I followed those callings, even though I was terrified and reluctant and didn't want to do it. I did it anyway. So this book tells my stories, and it defines in the end, as I'm writing this in 2011, wow, I didn't know that I was following my callings. I didn't know. And I listed all the places where, at the end of the book, I list all the places where I made these choices to follow a calling versus made the choice to follow what I should do. I should get married. I should do this. I should do that. All the shoulds, and where I followed the shoulds versus where I followed my desire and my callings. So that was really, really interesting to write the book and then go, wow, look at that. So really encourage you to write things down and write your own book, in a sense, write your own journal and see what happens in that process. Again, the intention here in these is to begin to, not to begin, I've been doing this for a long time for myself, but to encourage you and empower you to begin to notice and be aware of what is an expression that wants to come through you fearlessly, without fear. I mean, it's like, this is what wants to come through, this is what wants to happen, but I'm afraid. Quite often I'll hear from people who say, I know the universe takes care of me. I know that if I just get out of the way, abundance will come. I know that. They'll say that. And then there's the but. Yes, but if I come, if I let myself really believe that, I'm afraid that I won't be taken care of, the world will fall apart, I'll lose my job, I'll lose my place. So here they have a knowing. I know that the universe takes care of me. I know there's a God and it's divine and it supports and loves all of us. I know that, but I'm afraid to believe that. And that's that reluctance. And hi, Marge. Uh, so when there's that reluctance, we all have it. We all have it. We all have callings. We all have a sense and a place where we get inspired, but we go, yeah, no, I shouldn't follow that. And so we don't yet. And so part of this process of listening to and growing our relationship with our knowing self, this other part that isn't attached to fear-based living, or should or shouldn't based, or even guilt and shame. This part isn't attached to that. And in a sense, it's a paradigm shift to live to live spiritually means that we're living by principles that are different than the fear-based, judgment-based shoulds and shouldn'ts. And that's very challenging for most of us to cultivate, because we're so, especially my generation ish, and the last few generations in a sense, and older, because we're so trained. I think the new generations, the younger generations that are coming up, they have more freedom and flexibility to say, yeah, no, that didn't work for me, I'm doing that. And that's a really, really cool thing. But again, being able to listen for that unique voice that's for you versus here's what my generation wants us to do, or here's what your generation wants you to do. or here's, but there's a listening that is yours alone, and that's very challenging for us to engage in because, well, first of all, nobody talks about the fact that everybody, and I really do mean everybody, has these voices. We hear it as the angel and the devil. We've heard about those things, or the wolves. Which wolf do you feed? But we always have two voices that are at least talking to us. One is fear based, and one is not. And when this process of spirituality, cultivating and growing this relationship with our higher self, our higher knowing, it takes courage because it mostly goes against what we've been trained to do. It goes against what we're trained to do as perhaps mothers or fathers or parents or children or partners or teachers, or it goes against trainings. And we're really scared of going against because we've seen we've seen the consequences of going against. We get burned at the stake, we get hung, we get thrown into prison. But the truth is that we get hung, thrown into prison, killed, raped, murdered for doing nothing, sitting in our kitchen, and all of a sudden we're killed. We don't have to be doing anything extraordinary. We just be, and something happens. So, but we think, oh, if I go outside the box, if I go outside the constraints of what I've been taught, something bad's going to happen. It's like, I get it. And something that showed up for me, that was when I was thinking about this, was a number of years ago, and I was going, okay, if I'm rich, something bad's going to happen to me. Or in my past, I was rich and somebody stole my money and then I got poor. And I never want to go through that again. It's like, okay, so the choice is never go through that again and always be poor, because you can't get rich if you're always going to avoid that. So it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So I had to start to let go of that idea that being poor would keep me safe and keep me from having to deal with frustrating, horrible, terrible things. Poor people deal with frustrating, terrible, horrible things all the time. So we're having to listen to these voices. We're having to listen to the this is what I want, or this is what I'm inspired to do, or this is what I'm called to do. But so one instance, I well, there's a lot, but one of them was when I was in my 40s. Um, I met a person who had a 93-foot schooner and like 60 tons, like a big 100, let's say 100-foot sailboat, and he wanted me to go sailing with him. And one part of that is sailing across. Wanted to go around the world, and so that meant going across the ocean. And that was a big fear of mine. I didn't want to cross the ocean because I didn't want to be out of sight of land. But I was thinking, and this was all before my PhDs, all before all this stuff. I was just pretty ignorant in myself, ignoring truths. And there was a part of me that went, hell no, I'm not going. But I was called, in a sense. There was this whole, if you're curious to look at this book, there's a whole line of elements that came together that brought me to the moment where I was called to be on this boat and called to cross the Atlantic. I could have flown over to Ireland and met the boat there, but there was a calling. And I had to really be with the truth of that and say, I might die out there. And it's like, and if you don't go, then what? I might die in the plane crash. I might die, who knows, right? But that was my biggest fear, is I'm going to go and the boat's going to sink and I'm going to drown. I think it was a past life thing. So I had to be with that challenge of going, okay, I'm called strongly to this. And do I want to go? I mean, am I willing to risk everything? And that meant leaving Nova Scotia, which I said I would never do, leaving my favorite job in the world, which I said I would never do, everything that was just like a perfect life. And it's like, am I going to leave for that? And I did. And I think that's all part of what brings me here today is that calling. Even the smaller callings like, oh, I think I'll do YouTube lives every Thursday at 3:30. That in a sense is a calling too. But so many of us have these callings, and Joseph Campbell's Joseph Campbell talks about these things in The Hero's Journey, and I'll mention more of that in a. But initially, we have this initial calling. We have a sense of inspiration. We have a sense of something beyond ourselves that's saying, "Hey." And I've heard certain uh, actors and music writers and people who go, "Yeah, I get this thing on my, this thing that's talking to me," and it's like, "No, no, no, go away." And it's like, "No, no, no," and it's like, go away," and it's like, "Yeah, yeah, no." It won't go away, and so it's like, "Okay, I'm going to entertain you," and something really wonderful happens of that. So the more that we um, be aware of that and cultivate the courage to entertain this that is speaking to us, it grows our capacity to be the expression that we are in the world. And that in essence serves yourself and it serves the world, because it's like, wow, look what's possible because of that. um, so when I came, I did sail across the Atlantic, survived, did all kinds of amazing things because of that book. That boat had a transformational experience, which contributed to me inevitably becoming a transformational coach, um, and and training other people. That's all part of that unfolding that we don't have any clue about what's going to happen. I thought going on the boat and being with this guy, that would be my life, because I thought I would marry him and it would be happily ever after because he was wealthy, but that's not what happened. So one of the things that comes is true for most of us in terms of our callings is they take us through a spiritual journey, and a journey that we're here to experience. Um, if you haven't heard already, I'll say it again, that I believe we are spiritual beings here having a human experience to grow ourselves in our capacity to be this expression of the divine, to be the expression of love and light and openness, to be the expression of truth. And that means that we face challenging, difficult, scary, horrible, horrendous situations in life. And we think, oh, if I follow my intuitions, or I follow my inspiration, I follow my callings, I won't have to face that. Or gut, my gut feeling told me to do this, right? And if we follow our gut, we think nothing bad's going to happen. But the fact of the matter is that following our gut takes us on the path it takes us on. Um, and or a calling comes, and that calling might be an earthquake, or it might be the COVID. It might be something that's showing up that provides you an opportunity to choose, how do I be with this? When COVID first happened, I have I have a lot of training in being a therapist and a coach. I have a lot of training in spiritual principles and spiritual truths. I have a lot of training and a lot of direct experience with that. And when COVID came in, and I just was like, I kind of fell apart, and I went into a major panic. And it's like, we're all going to die. And I went through that through 9/11. Is But to say, okay, stop. How can stop? Like, stop all the panic. How can I see this in a way that is more from the alignment of spiritual truths and knowing, versus the fear-based everything that comes from that? So to stop myself and be in the truth, that's where the learning happens. That's where we're here to grow our capacities to not be in fear, and whatever that means, as in fearless. But even in situations where we're powerless and hopeless and helpless, we're still here in a sense of this spirit self that's saying, okay, let's look at this in a way that will grow our capacities versus shrink or contain or limit our capacities. I had a call from um, a client who wanted to refer some people to me. They had they were expecting, and the baby came a week ago, and when it was delivered, it was stillborn. So here these people put their hearts and souls into the dream and the experience and the expectations of this child coming into the world, and all the love that they were just so ready to share with this child. And the child, it was not alive. It was dead. And so that is a tremendous, excruciating calling. And most of us will go, hell no, not going there. And we turn to drinking, drugs, we turn to um, food, we turn to all kinds of things to medicate or to deny our real experience of that expression of grief, that expression of un unarticulated insanity. The insanity in a sense of you have no abilities, we have no abilities to handle that level of loss. And to be with that is extraordinary. And so this friend of mine asked me if I would work with this couple to help them through this grief. And I would be happy to do that. I would be honored to do that, because it's not just a matter of, oh, let's help them get over it. But it was a matter of, from my perspective, is what's their lessons here? What is it that they're here? What's the calling them to? And and how can I be an agent, or how can I steward them through this process? Not fix it or heal it or make it feel better, but really truly steward them through this experience of undeniable, unexpressible grief. So, it's huge what these callings can lead us to. Um, the callings that I've had have just challenged my courage to be true to myself, and to respect myself, and to honor those elements of me that are me in my expression versus who I'm supposed to be in relation to, for instance, the captain of that boat. I was on the boat for 2 years, and it was my relationship with the boat that I was experiencing and developing, in a sense, something bigger than me was happening. And so when we get to these places of callings or inspirations or passions, something is being requested of us on a larger scale. And we go, I don't even know what that means. It's like, that's right. You don't even know what it means. And yet when you know that calling, you know it. And this is a big distinction for me with people, is that we distinguish between what we think and what we know. And when I left the boat Tree of Life, and it was like, what am I going to do with my life? I had 2 master's degrees. I had been working in recovery in Nova Scotia, and I was now in the back in the United States. Going, what? I don't know. And I thought, well, I'll go back and get a PhD, but the clinical programs were so constraining, and my heart wanted to cultivate um, a better way of being with people in the spiritual world, or spiritual relationships, or spiritual challenges, because for me, that was the essence of our healing. The recovery programs that I'd worked with, the 12-step programs, that the essential aspect of the spiritual self is where I wanted to grow my abilities to work with people. And so I heard about this school in California, and it just the sounded like the right place for me. But it was like I didn't want to go to California. I said I never would go to California, and because I didn't want the pollution in the population and all of that. But as soon as I heard about this program, it was a hell yes. The calling was just so clear. But it was a private school, lots of money, way far away from family and friends and children. It's like, hell yes. And what does that mean in terms of the rest of my life? And that's part of what we go through is we get a calling, and it's like, yeah, but that means I have to leave the world that I've made. I leave all of that behind. And s- and that's what the calling does. And again, that's what um, Joseph Campbell's hero's journey is all about. I'm going to talk about that in a second. I do want to mention before we get too far in that I have a boot camp called Inward Bound Boot Camp for Self Transformation, and the link is below. And it's a really good opportunity. It's 20 videos that are 10 minutes or less, and it provides you with an opportunity to begin looking at the skills of how do you transform. What are the elements of transformation? This is a little caterpillar. What are the processes, the elements or stages of transformation in a way that is a boot camp. It's just the beginning, but it starts to strengthen your capacity to hear yourself and know yourself and watch how you think about things and the ability to say, I want to choose this. My scared self says I want to choose this, but I want to choose this. And so how do we be with those dilemmas? So this boot camp for self-transformation is really helpful and really speaks to all of the things that I'm talking about today, even in terms of I feel called to be an expression of the world this way, but I'm really afraid. All of those kinds of things. So check it out. The link's below, and see if it's something that is of value to you. I've had a number of people who I've trained as transformational coaches uh, go back and do this program, and they found it really, really helpful to give them a refresher of some of the coaching practices and skills that I teach. So it's got, if you're a coach, it might be of value to you that way too. So check it out. Um, so So number one, if we think if I'm spiritual enough, if I follow my intuitions, if I follow my gut, if I follow my callings, nothing bad's going to happen. I'll be taken care of, and in a sense, we are always taken care of. But there's always this adventure, this journey that we're here to experience because that's how we grow. And as we grow, we're up leveling ourselves to the next level of adventure. Star Wars is a really good analogy for this process of hero's journey. Um, the um, the um, the the story of Luke Skywalker is basically he's just a normal guy. This is a normal guy. He's helping out his uncle, and then stuff happens, and all of a sudden he's called to do something different. Um, and that's the beginning of this whole adventure. Or Lord of the Rings is like there's so many stories that are this hero's journey where we are normal, ordinary people. I'm normal, ordinary people. I live in a travel trailer with my dog. There's nothing there's nothing extraordinary about me. Truly. I grew up in a family of 9, Catholic, dysfunctional, alcoholic, nothing extraordinary. But what I've done with that because of the callings is what I have done, my experiences. But I'm not any different than anyone else, truly. So all of us are these ordinary people, and all of us have a calling. But few really listen because they're too scared. The trainings, the religions, the whatever it is that's so oppressive, we just can't get out of the way. And there's no judgment about that. There's no judgment about that because that in itself may be the journey is how do I be with the truth of no escape? And I wrote in Self Empowerment 101. I don't think I wrote it in here, but I looked through this. This is not a bad book, actually. This is not a bad book. Uh, but the wisdom of no escape. There's learning to be had when we can't escape, when we're powerless and hopeless and helpless. The people who've just lost this child, this infant, there's no escape from what they are about to experience, what they are experiencing. A friend of mine I mentioned last week, in 91, his wife, dementia, broke her hip, There's no escape for him of the grief. He's been blessed with a life that has had very, very little crisis in it. So this is like the first time in his life where he is in this state of powerless, helpless, hopeless, no escape. And it's like, what do I do with that? And it's like, yeah, that's the question. What do you do with that? And we can hide and avoid and drink and medicate, or we can just be in the big fat be with of the truth of what is, in a way that awakens us and grows us, as opposed to keeps us small and contained and contrived and small. So so that's a big deal. Is we're all ordinary. We're all offered an opportunity, a calling, and we can choose the calling or not. And most of us, according to the 12 stages, I'm looking at this article that I found online called "The 12 Stages of the Hero's Journey," written by Susan Gupta, Dr. Susan Gupta, and her focus is on recovery in women. But I really like how she's written these up. So first of all, there's the ordinary world, la 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 la, and then there's the call to adventure, which may be something bad has happened, or like me, a call to go sailing on a sailboat, or go across the country and go to school in California. Um, Other interesting callings, but those were two of them. We get these callings, and or we get cancer, or we lose our job, or the COVID shows up. So all of these things are callings. They're invitations. Most of us refuse the calling. Nope, not going there. Uh, but then something happens, or the calling is so strong you can't deny it, you can't avoid it. You do, okay, I got to. But quite often, somebody like again Luke Skywalker, somebody comes in and says, "Hey, you can do this." And I was in Alexandria where Susan Trout was, which is the Institution for Attitudinal Studies. And so I would taken a workshop there, and that's where I heard about the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, where I got my PhD, now Sophia University. But I went and talked to Susan and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" So she was a mentor for me to sort of say, "Yeah, it sounds like it's," she says, "How do you hear things? How do you know what's true?" Which was a great question. How do you make decisions? Which is another great question. And I said, "Well, I hear things." And she goes, "Well, it sounds like this might be a calling for you." And and so to trust that and begin that process um, was what I had to do, and begin to trust. Yeah, that's part of this process when callings or hero's journey or whatever shows up, whether it's cancer or death or loss or joy, or you won the lottery. Those are all callings. We get callings every day, really. And what we do with it, that's our choice. That's the part of us that's at choice, and we can choose based on fear, or we choose based on something else. When I was 16, I had heard about this program called Outward Bound, and as far as I knew, it was for boys, at least from 16 on. But when I heard about it, it was a hell yes. It's like, I want to do that. It's a wilderness school, and then it was just a hell yes. And I was 15, and I was a girl, and I didn't know if they had programs for girls. And so I was in one of the first programs for girls, which was pretty cool. But it's like so out of the box. My parents thought, like, what is she doing? What is she? So everything I've done, a lot of my life has been out of the box. And I think we all have that capacity to be out of the box if we choose that. But we're asked, we're invited. The invitation is there. The calling is there. And what we do with that is ours. And quite often, people who say no to the calling, they find themselves in a lot of duress. They find themselves struggling in the resistance and the constraint. They find themselves in guilt and shame and frustration because because they're choosing to not follow. And they may do that because they have they feel the responsibility to take care of the family or take care of their parents or take care of something. But there's a challenge there. And even in that, there's a calling. So again, it's not like, oh, here's the calling, I have to take it. Here's the call, I gotta take it. It might be how we be when we don't take the call, and the struggles and the challenges and the surrendering and the acceptance that has to take place. So it's just a fascinating paradox, because either way you're going to grow yourself unless you choose not to. It's like I can say I have to stay home and be with my parents and grow my experience of surrendering my joy, or surrendering my um, art or my craft or my mastery or my artistry, surrendering something. But in that complete surrendering, there's something that happens. And when a calling comes, we have to surrender our attachments to what was the home. We have to surrender our attachments to the stuff, the baggage, so that we're free to follow the calling, whatever that is. Um, and so quite often I was saying meeting the mentor is one of those things that happens, is that you meet somebody who guides you or supports you or refers you to somebody else so that you're getting what you need. Now the fascinating thing about life is if we're I believe this is true for everyone. It's not like I believe this is true for everyone, like I totally do, that by talking to any individual on the planet, I would hear how they got to be who they are in their essential nature to the degree that they have. When I was in Bali, this was a number of years ago, I was um, taken from the hotel where I was staying to the airport, and it was a 2.5 hour drive. And it was a farmer who on Sundays um, shuttles people back and forth from where I was staying, as part of his living. So here's a farmer. He's Indonesian, Balinese, and doesn't speak English much. But we had such an extraordinary conversation, and he had the capacity to articulate so much of himself and how his life was. He was like 37 or something like that. And listening for the ways that he brings in the expression of himself, and the way that he finds joy and expresses joy in his life is extraordinary. And that's what it's like people, all of us have that. But if we don't ask the right questions, it gets tampered down, and we don't think people care, because most people act as if they don't care. And uh and that's what diminishes our sense of truth. Being married to, or having children that, or having parents that, or sisters and brothers, or teachers that don't care, or appear to not care, we begin to our light begins to dim, because there's no capacity to shine. We feel that way. We feel weaker and weaker and weaker in our capacity to shine. So what I'm talking about is that willingness to listen and hear that shiny, expressive part that needs to be expressed in the world, whatever that means. And so for me, life coaching, transformational coaching might be a therapist, might be friends, family, whoever who can hear you, who sees you, who gets you. We want to cultivate those relationships, because that's the person you're going to go to and say, "Hey, I got this calling, I got this idea." And they'll go, "Hell yeah, take it on. Why not? What do you got to lose? It's fun. It's hard, it's scary." But listening to your mentors, or and your mentor might be the bird on the tree that just at the right moment is singing a beautiful song, and you go, "Yes, that's it." So we can't always think it's going to be a person. It might be something else. It might be a lot of when I'm reading my oneness book or Course in Miracles. all kinds of revelations show up, all kinds of ahas show up. And I go, that's the direction. That's for me. And sometimes it's not clear. Sometimes doing these YouTubes, you've heard me potentially say this before, these YouTubes are challenging to me because how much of it is my desire to be an expression of what I consider to be truth and my expression to support and empower you because I love doing this, and how much is it because I want to grow my YouTube video, subscription, and oh, by the way, please do a thumbs up and subscribe uh, if you find this valuable, and please share it with others if you find it valuable. But how much of this is about that versus how much of it is a calling? I think my work in the world is a calling. And that's, I believe every single one of us has that possibility, that potential. But what we have to pull ourselves through, which is the next level on the stages, that's a challenge. So if we have a mentor and the mentor says, yeah, go take that class, take that path. It might be separating from partners. It might be separating from the work that you've been doing. It might be getting chemo treatments. It might be not getting chemo treatments. We don't know, right? We don't know what that is, but we know that for you, it's a calling. Um, there's a book called Radical Remissions, which I love, by Dr. Kelly Turner, which talks about people who had cancer and had radical remissions. Anita Morjani is a person that had a radical remission in her cancer. She had huge tumors, and they just disappeared after a near death, basically a near death experience. So we don't know what's what, but our journey or our path will take us in the direction that's ours, and that's what happens. So we have this some sort of mentoring that goes, here's what I'm going to do. We have a knowing, and one of the things I love is that we think we should know. We think we should know what to do. If you got cancer, you go, here's what I should do, and here's what people tell me to do. But if you really stop and say, what's mine to do, given my self, given my experience, given my all the things that are mine, what's mine to do? And it's really scary to assess from what's mine to do. And for some people, it's a no-brainer. You just go get chemo. But if we really listen to what's mine to do, it takes us on a journey of truth with ourselves. It takes us on this path of spirituality, of relationship with this part that says, here's what you do, here's how you do it. And this part goes, yeah, no, I don't, I think there's another way. Yeah, but, and we have this conversation, but we won't know. And I've said this to myself before, but I actually heard it with Paul Selig. When you know, and you won't know a moment before that. You won't know when I was on this, should I go across the Atlantic? Should I not go across the Atlantic? Because I don't want to be with that fear. I don't want to be with that uncomfortableness. Like a lot of people cross the Atlantic, not, they don't all die. So there's a chance I'll survive. But those kinds of dilemmas were going through my brain, but it was like, what's mine to do? That's the moment for you, is to be in the discernment so that you come to truth with what's yours to do versus what other people are telling you should do. Here's what you should do. Here's what you shouldn't do. Okay. Marge says, knowing you, the YouTubes are almost a pure calling. You have helped me immensely in recognizing my own light and encouraging me to turn up the brilliance. Turn it up, girl. Turn it up. Thank you, Marge. I really appreciate hearing that. That means a lot to me. So there's that moment where you know what's yours to do. And that means you're now going to take the steps, whatever the next step is. When I was leaving my marriage, I was 26. And I thought the hardest part is, first of all, deciding that was what I was going to do. And I thought, okay, I got there. I'm leaving this marriage. And it was like, okay, the hardest thing is done. And it's like, oh, wait, no, I have to tell them. That's the hardest thing. So it was like, that was the hardest thing. And then I told him. And then it's like, oh, now that next hardest thing was actually packing my bags and leaving with my children. That was the next hardest thing. So it's not as though we crossed the threshold, much like Luke Skywalker, um, and all of a sudden, he's this Jedi and life is great. It's like he meets one adventure after another. He meets one challenge after another. He meets one um, horrible, terrible thing after another. He meets Princess Leia. He meets good people. He meets good things. He meets joyful things. So it's not like, oh my God, here's the next worst thing. Here's the next worst thing. Here's the next worst thing. But um, when we're facing our calling, sometimes it feels like that. Like when I chose to go to ITP and I had to go to Nova Scotia and pack up my house and things. And I had a little car and I had to get it where I needed it to go. And then I got to the United States and then I drove. I drove from Nova Scotia all the way to California. And every moment in this calling, so it was like that was crossing the threshold. Every moment I anticipated something happening in any part of the world that would change the course of my adventure. That I would go, yeah, no, I'm going to go to Wyoming and live on a dude ranch instead, or somebody would come into my life and it would change the direction, the trajectory. I totally was open to what would unfold in this crossing of the of the United States in my little tiny car. And then I got to Santa Cruz where my friend was, and I stayed with her and while I got ready for school, and it was just an extraordinary adventure. But you have to cross the threshold. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I hear this quite often with people who are not happy in their marriages, or not happy in their jobs, or the particular career focus is like, I don't want to do this anymore. And there's a threshold where you go, okay, I'm going to stop doing that and see what shows up. And that's the moment. So crossing the threshold is where you then are constantly tested, and you meet challenges, and you meet things that awaken you. And there's places where you go, oh, that's a bad thing, or that's a good thing. And we're looking for ways to balance and find stability in this new unfolding of ourselves. And we never know how that's going to show up. We never know how that's going to show up, but we're always looking for signs and symbols. Okay, this means I'm on the right path. This means I'm on the wrong path. It's like, okay, okay. And as a transformational coach and support person, it's like I'm listening for what people think. I think of myself as a thinking partner. So people say, here's what that means. It's like, okay. And so now what? Now that means that, now what? Because when we add meaning to something, now we act according to what we believe it has, what that meaning means. And it's like to some degree, we want to erase all that data that we learned in the ordinary life, because we're now in a state of something else. Again, with Luke Skywalker, all of a sudden he's in a different reality. And it's like, how do you make sense of that? And again, there's always these support people that come into our lives that support us to move on to the next level. And my experience over and over again, and I hear this from other people, but from my direct experience, is I continue to get the messages I need that keep up leveling me to the next level of knowing, the next level of experience, the next level of even articulation. Me being able to talk about this today is, couldn't do this 10 years ago, couldn't do this probably 2 years ago. I don't know. But that up leveling is constant when we've taken the hero's journey. So we're always tested. And in a sense, that's a good thing because it keeps me conscious. Am I practicing? Because I can go back to sleep. There's part of me, it's like, I'm just going to go back to sleep. My newest, if you've been watching me in January, I talked about the fact that my intention for this year was to have no intention. And so what that does for me is alleviates guilt and shame from my choosing to be more live from inspiration versus from shoulds and shouldn't. It also gives me clarity or mindfulness of when I'm operating from fear or guilt or shame or what you should be doing. And by doing that, then I get to be a choice to say, no, I don't want to live from guilt. I don't want to live from shame. I don't want to live that way. And with that freedom, what shows up? So it's not like I'm just not a non-intentional person, but this is a very pragmatic test. It's a very pragmatic intention, and a journey is unfolding in front of me. That's really pretty fascinating. That part that says if I don't operate from the contrived world of this is how you have a business, what's going to show up? And what's going to show up is, in my experience, more business, more fun, more playfulness, more capacity to be myself versus here's how I should do it. Here's how I'm supposed to do it. And it wasn't fun. It wasn't fun because I was in angst. Like, oh my God, like 70% of my day was in angst because I didn't get things done I was supposed to get done. And it's like, stop. It's no fun. So then I'm being tested like, oh, there's a moment, there's a question, there's an idea, there's an opportunity. It's like, how do I be with that? And I go, okay, I'm not going to feel guilty about that. I'm not going to feel guilty about that. That's basically what it comes to is start to have more fun. And guess what? The money keeps coming even more. So it's like all that thing about do what you love and the money will come. That's absolutely true. I watched a YouTube live with Anita Morjani, and she was talking about that. She's like, money comes in. Money is just currency. It's just energy, and it's like breathing. We don't worry about where our breath is, where the oxygen's going to come from. We just know it's going to show up. And so when we're in that state of knowing the money's going to be there, we can just relax, have fun, do what you love doing. Take the time it takes to go outside and or wherever you want to be, what you want to do. Like the money will come. But that, in a sense, is a calling. Oh, I'm going to do that. Our New Year's resolution is a calling. And what we do with that is what we do with it. But we're tested along the way. And that's a good thing because it keeps us growing. If you're in third grade and you're taking an arithmetic, you're going to know what you're doing. But when you're in seventh grade, you're not taking the same arithmetic examination. You're taking a different one because you're growing and expanding your capacity to know and experience and problem solve and all of that. That's what we're given over and over and over again. So it's not like it's all going to be good. Just follow your dreams. It's all going to be good. No, it's going to be an adventure, but it's an adventure that you create because you're following your calling, you're following your passion, you're following your journey. If you don't, that's just another journey, and that's another big fat be with. Either way, you're in a big fat be with. You just get to choose which big fat be with you want to be with. I've got a couple more minutes here, so I just want to finish. I won't go through all of these because you can go online and look at Joseph Campbell's hero's journeys, and there's all kinds of different writings about that. But in this process, we have to approach and engage with the part of us that we're most afraid of. And most of us are afraid that we're bad, terrible, horrible, unlovable people. But in this process of this hero's journey, we realize the courage, we realize the stuff, we realize the essence of who we are. And it's an extraordinary experience. And I'm just saying, it's an extraordinary experience. And as I do it over and over and more, there's a process of not being so afraid of the yucky stuff, but honoring all that I've been through, all the lifetimes, all that stuff, honoring those incarnations and all that those individuals or those aspects of myself went through. So rather than going, oh, I was a horrible person in that lifetime, or I was a horrible person in that lifetime, or I was a greedy person in that lifetime, it was like, wow, each of those aspects of me had an extraordinary human experience. And I begin to honor that versus, keep pretending and keep like, don't go there because it's too scary. It is scary, but it's not bad. Once you get it's not bad at all, then it's just another inward bound experience. Or as Dr. Gupta says, the entering into the cave, that going into it is just the experience. And you go, yep, it's another cave. And just like in Star Wars, another whatever shows up is what shows up. And it's like, death defying, it feels like. But somehow we have this amazing, truly, you each have this amazing capacity to thrive through that. And I can know that from what I've gone through. The next opportunity, I don't know if I'll survive in terms of this physical form, but I trust I'm taken care of. I trust that I'm supported. I have a lot of knowing now about all of that, but I'm only as good as my last experience. And go, hell yes, that was horrible and terrible. Don't want to do that again. To like, well, here's a new one. That test. But the deeper and darker the deeper we can be with ourselves and honor and respect the experiences of this being, even sexual abuse or violence, terrible, horrible things. We can be with and honor that. We're so much better. And we're not living in the constraints of oppression and personal human, we're no longer oppressing ourselves by our own fears. We're allowing ourselves, exonerating ourselves, freeing ourselves up from that. And it's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. And it doesn't make any of us more extraordinary. It doesn't make me more extraordinary. I'm not an extraordinary person because I do this. I have these extraordinary experiences, as do you already. And what shows up in terms of what's next for you, who knows? The last piece of this hero's journey is that we return home so that we can share with others our experience. That's what, in a sense, the 12-step programs are. We have sponsors who've been sober enough and can now, and they've gone through the crazy insanity and all the stuff. And so they come back and they go, hey, I want to support people in going through this process. I want to support people on their recovering journey. I want to support people in knowing who they are in serenity. I want to support people. So that's what happens with a lot of people who've gone on their journeys, their hurt heroes journeys, is they come back and they want to support and help people or serve people in a way that maybe they didn't even realize before. So it's not all, but that's just what I have for today. That's a lot. Hey, thanks for hanging in here a little bit longer. We've gone over time. So thanks for being here. And if you have any comments below, please leave comments below if you have any or have any questions. I will answer and return any comments that I get. So please let me know how this is for you, and let me know how I can support you. You can find me at the paradigmshifts.com. My books are on Amazon. Boot camp is below, and I'll see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.